fintech startups. I worked with a fintech startup during their Series B and C finance runs, and so I understand the cash run piece. Um, but more than that, what I understand is the stress of finances on people, particularly the stress of finances on people that look like us.
Mm.
So, and a lot of the stuff I do, and I am not a pastor. I do run an outreach organization, Helping Hands, Giving Hope, where we put Christ's love in work clothes. Actually, it's funny because this afternoon we'll be doing a 300 plus turkey giveaway where we do 300 turkeys and 9,000 pounds of other food um, out throughout the community. So I do a bit of everything, but most important thing that I do is I try to empower people with my words and true words, not just any words. And so, as we talk about faith, as we talk about finance, I believe that those two go hand in hand because faith offers you wisdom, and you need wisdom to be financially literate and financially successful. And so, I try my best to do those.
Wow. Well, it's funny. I don't know why in my head I always thought you were a pastor, but I guess it's because I connect you with your faith. And I know you certainly have a ministry, it seems. You have things that you want to do to make the world a better place, which I respect about you immensely. Um, let's talk about your specialty in terms of credit, debt collection, things like that. One of the things I was talking to you about before we came in is I believe that this economy is in trouble. I believe that the consumer's in deep trouble right now. I'll give you some stats to kind of get you going. I'll punt the ball to you and then you can run it back for a touchdown. Um, According to ABC News, total household debt in the U.S. recently hit a record high. Debt is now over 18 trillion, which is pretty massive. Credit card debt is also surging. Delinquencies are rising. Many more households are falling behind and becoming seriously delinquent on credit card and loan payments. This is according to the Federal Reserve. I'll give you a third one. According to Bain.com, lower income consumers are showing a steep deterioration in their financial health and saving intent, signaling rising hardship among the most vulnerable. Can you speak to this in terms of what you've been seeing and how we might want to view what's going on in the U.S. economy right now?
So, that's a phenomenal point to start. So, let's start at where we looked at during their most recent economic collapse was in 2008, right? One thing that I noted in 2008, and I worked on the asset disposition side of things, is people were hyper leveraged because they had availability to credit. What we're seeing now is that people aren't hyper leveraged. So as you talk about the lower economic or lower income individuals, the biggest threat to lower income individuals is availability of funds. And then the squeeze of cost of goods, particularly in places like California. I live in California, guys. And so what we saw with our most recent minimum wage increase, people are like, oh, great, minimum wage increase is phenomenal. What that does is that creates a minimum wage compression. As you falsely raise wages, you falsely raise goods. Those goods will continue to go up and increase. For the first time in the history of the organization, an in and out number one combo is over $10 in California. People's like, oh, that's not a huge deal. But it represents a noticeable enough increase that it's increased everything about that. So when we start talking about the lower income individuals, we didn't see the squeeze on lower income individuals in 2008 because lower income individuals didn't have access to credit. And so what we're seeing now with the advent of the fintech model, with the advent of questionable financial services being made available under the idea of we finance everybody, will you finance everybody at what cost? And so, it's the lack of education on one end, the increase of goods on another end, and then even as we start looking at, particularly with Black people, what we haven't seen is we haven't seen a drastic increase in Black unemployment, but we did see an increase in Black female unemployment, or what are jobs held by the most educated demographic in the country. Those are jobs that previously we saw were very stable jobs. Jobs in municipalities, jobs in civic, jobs in government agencies. Now we've seen a shift in that. And so the one thing that concerns me most is not the change in economics, but it's the ability to recover from that change. And I think we haven't given much thought to that. Because when I look at unemployment numbers, and as we talk about these faux unemployment numbers, and the labor statistics have been misstated for a number of years, right? Because under one administration, you might include seasonal workers and census workers in this. Under another administration, you might not. We do things to tweak the unemployment numbers. But what we look at is, when I look at from an economic standpoint, from a debt standpoint, from a management standpoint, is what happens when people exit the workforce and they don't return to the workforce. And we're seeing that with the advent of the gig economy and things of that nature. All of these things playing into people's ability to participate effectively in the economic process, particularly in the credit process, because we forget from our mindset how important the credit process is. We need people involved in the credit process because it shows us two things. Number one, it shows us consumer confidence, and consumer confidence drives a consumer's ability to continue to spend money. So, I
Oh,
mean, and we're seeing it in places like Home Depot. People try to say, well, their issue is because, of ICE activity and perception. So they had a dip in earnings. Well, their dip in earnings wasn't, that great, and their earnings were dipping before that. So that's not really a true model. Because if we would have saw an increase on the Lowe's earnings side and we didn't. So really, what's going on? I mean, I think what we're going to see now is people are scared financially. People are uneducated. They continue to be uneducated. And then the rich get richer. And I think it was Rockefeller that said, when there's blood in the streets, the people will eat. And that's what we're starting to see now.
when there's blood in the streets, the people will eat.
Yes, that like there will be a hyper consumption of investments, et cetera, by the those that are able. And we're seeing that. Uh,
Okay,
you
so
know,
he's saying that when there's blood in the streets, that's when he's able to go in and
and
make
buy.
money. It's
Yeah.
also like what acquire distressed assets and things like
Yep.
that. Is that what you mean?
Yep.
Yeah,
And I think you
yeah.
talked
That
about
and
that
that's
recently.
yeah, that's a good point. I was explaining, and I think everybody in here definitely knows this one is that, you know, in contrast to common perception, the savvy investors are the ones who do the most investing when everybody else stops investing, right? Like, and so what everyone does is they all want to go invest when they see the stock market going to all-time highs. But the smart investors say, I'm not getting high on my own supply. I'm going to let my existing assets win. And then when everything becomes distressed, then I'm going to go make my move because
Yeah.
everything will be cheap. Right. So you also said something that was really interesting that got my attention. You were talking about um debt. And this to me would be like what I would consider to be like a fun Dave Ramsey-ish conversation. I always hear Dave Ramsey. He seems, I don't watch him all the time, but I respect him. And he talks a lot about debt, almost like you want to be debt free, no debt, get rid of debt, no debt, no debt, no debt. And I always said, well, actually, debt can be helpful. Debt can help you grow your wealth. I
Yeah.
but to his point, sometimes debt can give you that rope to hang yourself, right?
Hmm.
It's like getting that flashy new car, and if you're not a careful driver, you can hurt yourself with that car, right? If you drive drunk or if you drive too fast or you don't know where you're going. So, with that being said, that access to leverage, that access to credit, you said actually with that you said another thing that was really interesting was you mentioned that there are places that'll say, we'll finance everybody. You want the
Hmm.
car, we'll finance anybody. And nobody says, well, what's the cost of finance and what's the cost of this capital? And then that's where it seems like people would get into lots of trouble. Can you speak on that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few things to that. There's a ton of on the repossession market. There's a ton of buy her, pay her places, and so you'll have, particularly around the greater Los Angeles area in the hood, you'll have buy her, pay her. There's one not too, there's one not too far from here where you'll go in, you can buy a car, you can remit your payments weekly there. They'll put a tracker on the car or ignition kill switch and things of that nature. But no one talks about, what's the cost of that? If I'm financing a car at 32% interest. But here's what also no one's talked about is, when you don't have educated access to funds, you'll make ill decisions uh, at the expense and at the desire of comfort. Look at payday loan places. I had a meeting with a payday loan company a few years back. They had reached out to me to come in and do some consulting for them. And they said, "Oh, we found you on LinkedIn." And I asked the lady, I said, "What made you think that I would even consider doing something like this? Like, I run an altruistic organization. What made you think that I would even do this?" So I said, "Hey, what's the average credit score of your," this is like 3 years ago, "what's the average credit score of your average borrower?" And she was like, 656. It's the average age of your average borrower, 41 years old. So it wasn't that they needed money from you because they could go somewhere else and get it, but they weren't educated. And so we forget about that. We forget about, even with organizations like the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, people think that these organizations provide great services and beneficial services. What they don't provide is they don't provide education. We're lacking education. We're lacking access to education. We're lacking access to information. When you look at the average wage in the United States, I think the average wage in the United States is something like $61,000, $61,800, something like that. Um, Average car payment in the U.S. is $812. You guys can check my numbers. I might be a couple of dollars off, but that's right. It's north of $800 because from an underwriting perspective, one of the organizations I worked with, that was something that we talked about. I want you to tell me, Dr. Boyce, that at a 50 or let's call it $60,000, at a $5,000 a month minus taxes, insurance, etc., your net take home would probably be, I don't know, let's call it 4,000 a month to be conservative. Where would it make sense for you to have a car payment of $800 on average? It doesn't.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
But we present it as it's a good idea. And you talked about institutions. I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago um, that BlackRock. You look at BlackRock; they're the largest institutional holder of real estate assets. People don't think that's a big deal. That is a huge deal when you have institutions like BlackRock and Vanguard being large holders of distressed assets, because it changes it corporatizes the economic real estate model.
Yeah.
Then they can go through and make, essentially you're making cities renter organizations. There's no ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
we fall into the false sense of security, thinking it's okay of saying, okay, well, what about the 50-year mortgage that Trump's talked about? Guys, listen, this is a horrible idea. You're talking about no ownership ever. A
You're
50-year
hurting me.
mortgage? It's
I
bananas.
cannot see. I'm legally blind.
But here's the kicker. There's places out there doing 96-month auto loans. I had a discussion with a
Wait,
credit
wait, did you
union
say you said
CEO.
96 months?
Yeah, I had a discussion with a CEO of a credit union, and he was talking to me about they're toying with the idea of 96-month auto loans. And I said to him, I was like, you do understand that and again, now keep in mind, guys, I work on the um, credit union side, and someone said they've never heard of that. There's a few places out there you can get a 96-month auto loan,
That's 8 years,
eight
right?
years.
That's do the math right.
But the loan has to be over a certain amount of months. Somebody in the comments said they've never heard of that. I ain't never heard of it either. Like, so when they said it was a good idea, they said, but the problem is that you had to look at vehicles over $60,000, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, has anyone talked about from a underwriting perspective? What's your length of time to recover and to be in a positive equity position in that vehicle from a finance realm? And they're like, we never thought about it. I was like, so that would mean it would take you like 4 years before you would see, if you had to repo that vehicle within the first 4 years, you were at automatic loss. And they
Yeah.
were like, huh. So
Yeah.
all of these things matter. And people go, well, why? They go, well, they matter because they impact pricing. Pricing impacts availability.
Mm-hmm.
It impacts financial availability for even basic financial services that are outside of the lending space. Like getting you to come in and get a checking account, getting you to come in and get a savings account. Those are things that draw people in, right? So if I'm unable to, because I'm hyper leveraged on the debt side and I'm underwriting at such a high interest rate, my spread from the deposit to interest rate is going to be off, and I can't be a benefit from a financial services perspective. And
Yeah,
that's what you
just so
see.
you know. just so you know, I was looking at when you said 96 months, I said, holy crap. That's not I mean, let's do the math, everybody, shall we? We're gonna do this Mr. Rogers style because that's like that's like traveling to outer space in my head. I 72 months is crazy to me, but so 60 months is 5 years, 72 months is 6 years, 84 months is 7 years. 96 months is 8 years. And check this out. Did you know that there are some lenders out there that are going 108 months,
Not
which
9
is
years.
9 years, and 120 months, which is a decade. A decade in financial prison. And the reason I call it financial prison, and I assume you would agree, is it's one thing if you have that kind of a payment plan on an asset that's appreciating in value, right? Then you can justify the interest payments in some cases because you're getting this capital gain, which is increasing your wealth. But it almost seems to me, Shannon, that if you get some long-term loan like that because you want to keep your payment down, and then you falsely believe that they're doing you a favor by keeping your payments low, you're going to be underwater very quickly, right? Your debt, meaning your debt will exceed the value of the thing that you're paying down. You're literally making payments on an illusion, right? You're
Yes.
literally paying for an asset that doesn't really exist anymore because the values drop so much. And in a way, it almost even reminds me of student loans to some extent. Lots of people are paying on student loans, and you look and you say, well, how much cash flow are you making, per year from that degree? Like, this is this cash flow generating asset called a college degree. How much money are you making from the thing that you actually studied in college, the certification you got or whatever? A lot of people don't even use the degree. So that's like buying an asset. It's almost like buying a house for somebody else, and they own the house, but you're making the payments on the house. So and you're homeless.
Yeah.
Like that's how crazy it's at. I mean, please go ahead.
Now, before the 108 and 120 month repayment option was available before, but it was available for RVs and boats, assets that you had an intent on paying over on a long period of time. So when you start talking about making it available on autos, I mean, it is literally shocking to see that because I mean, you might as well do a lease and run it under a business and get the 100% benefit back from it. But I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about financial prison, and then the lenders that do this, we have to look at how do they treat their people. You know, there was a lend, you know, there was a company years ago called Ugly Duckling where you could go and just buy a car, and the duck you could buy stuff there. They were something before the duck, but they would do things like they had an ignition kill switch issue that they would put on a car. So if Boyce got behind on his payments, they would kill the ignition.
Wow.
They had vehicle trackers on it, all kinds of stuff. And then, organizations like the CFPB, they stepped in and, you know, fixed it and moved on. But I think what we're
Wow.
starting to look at is here's my concern about, the financial scope and the path of things is that people will be scared to avoid participating in the investment process
What
because
do you mean by that? What do you
because
mean
it,
scared to participate in the investment
because
process?
they're so nervous now on holding on to their money and holding on to cash. Cash is king. They hear things about there being, the, the high delinquency options and all this, and hey, the woe is me. What's going to happen to me? That doesn't mean we don't participate in the investment process. We just participate from a educated perspective, and we understand the risk. I think when you start looking at Dave Ramsey, I think one thing that makes Dave Ramsey powerful and it's his delivery and its tone and it's a shock and awe value. So he has a very unique ability to arrest your attention. But that doesn't mean everything he says is the gospel. I don't agree with a lot of the things that he says from a debt perspective. Oh, you're a dummy if you owe debt. You're a dummy if you buy a house and pay a mortgage. You're stupid if you buy a car. Mm, how about you have the ability to evaluate the risk on your own, be an independent thinker, and make the decision that works best for you?
Mhm. And,
And
and I think
that's
that
kind of
that's
where I come from
important.
now. From a
Well, it's got to be that. It's got to be that. I mean, the thing about capitalism, Shannon, to me is it's a little bit like living in the financial version of the Wild Wild West. I think we'd all be lying to ourselves if we were convinced that Donald Trump is going to work extremely hard to protect uneducated people from financial mistakes that they may make, right? But then, even beyond Trump, though, I don't think that either party has done a good job with that. Particularly if you think about the fact that you think about who's really funding the government. It's the billionaires
Mhm.
and the corporations that make money by basically creating a caste system in our society, right? You got the caste system in the sense that you got the people that build wealth, and then you got the people that just live YOLO, just consume. Right? We want you to we go ahead. We want you to go out to eat. We want you to go on vacation. We want you to buy the new car because we want you to be comfortable, right? So we're gonna do you a favor. Because I'm a businessman. You're not a businessman. That's above you. You're a worker. You go to work every day so you can get money, so you can come back and give it to my business, and I'll do you a favor by financing any purchase that you want to make from this car dealership, right? And so that could so really it's very important, and I think it's very important for Black people to be conscious of this because that consciousness allows us to overcome the fact that we're probably in most cases the first group of people they go to
Mhm.
when that happens. So it's like, hey, we really want to help the Black community. So, and we know that Black people have 1.8, 1.7 trillion in spending power, and we respect you. We like you, right? Like, because we want to be liked so much, right? They know these things, right? So, because we like you, we're going to allow you to buy a car from us. We're going to allow you to come and work for us. We're going to allow you to give us your money, right? Because remember, in the civil rights movement, your people died. They were getting, beaten, eaten, hosed, and bitten by dogs just so they can come to our businesses and give us money, right? So you don't want to disrespect your ancestors. You have to do what fight for what they died for, and I think that it's sort of a whole kind of weird psychological game. And if you're not a person that's trying to be awake, then you're gonna fall right into it, right?
I got a buddy that's a senior executive for a national bank, and so a couple of years ago he calls me, and it's a white guy, and I don't mean like a white guy. I mean a really white guy. I mean like a white guy. And so he calls me, and when I say
Like
he was
extra
up in
weight.
arms, and I say, "What are you up in arms about?" And he goes, "You wouldn't believe the dumb things that I saw today." And I said, "What did you see?" He says, "Well, and I won't mention the bank. They are so focused on staying relevant because they say we have to stay relevant and, you know, show that we support the Black community. So we're going to have a discussion on hair and hair acceptance." And I said, "So," I said, "Well, who taught this discussion?" He was like, "Well, one of our HR people." He was like, "A white lady." And I was like, "So," and it made me really think. He was like, "It was the dumbest thing ever." He was like, "Nothing was yielded from it. The only thing they talked about is we have to be okay with being okay with how Black people wear their hair." See, that's what they think of us. And you said this, we want to be liked and accepted, but we don't want to push back. And so when you say that Trump can't fix the issues, you're right. Obama didn't fix the issues. Biden didn't fix the issues. Bush 1 and Bush 2 didn't fix the issues that we face from an economic perspective. They didn't do anything to improve the economic community. Um, I just said I live in California. Los Angeles has a Black mayor. What has been done as a city to fix a lot of the economic issues that face people that live in the Black community? There's been great development in areas that were primarily inhabited by African American people. Downtown LA, near the Coliseum, where the new soccer field is, all that. What do we do to grow that? What do we do to grow jobs and and assist the Black community in those areas? Nothing. Long Beach, second largest suburb in the area. They have a Black mayor. What has he done? And look, I don't want y'all to think that I would not say this to his face because I said this to his face not too long ago. What have you done to benefit the Black community? You've done a lot to benefit the LGBTQ community, spending $6 million to paint lifeguard stations rainbow and intersections rainbow. What have we done to lessen that gap in the Black community? Nothing. And so what I say when I say that, I say all this to say is that as the Black community, we have to now come together as our own to realize that no one's coming to save us. Like no one's coming to these dudes that say that this people are on my case all the time because I'm somewhat anti-government in my stance of things. But I'm anti-government because the government fails us in every point.
Yeah.
Like it's we want to see that the table so bad we're willing to spend and to do and to do things to come alongside of. Um, and I think I talked about this at the Black Wealth Boot Camp a couple of years ago when you were there. We talked about the U.S., uh, China, Japan, Germany, the UK, Brazil. Those are the only six nations that have a greater spending capital greater than the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's crazy. Think about that. And so when you in, or not actually, I take one of those out and put California in because California is the fifth largest economy in the world, and even that's a sham. So, what about us now? Uh, I mean, you've worked all the whole time I've known you. You've worked only to provide us information on. I mean, you've been vulnerable and transparent with it. So talking about, hey, this is what I did when I got my PhD. This is how I left the corporate space. You were on CNN talking about it. You've been around talking about it. Um, you were talking about benefits to the Black community a few years ago, and I think the FBI showed up outside your house. I was telling somebody about that. I was like, so we need more Boyce Watkins. We need more Dr. Claude Anderson to be out here telling us what we should be doing. Dr. Claude Anderson been talking about powernomics for how many years?
Yeah.
And we haven't really paid attention to all the stuff that he was saying. Going back to the time of Malcolm X, it's almost like he was a prophet um, where he talked about the fact that Black people we were so concerned about integration when that may not even been the best thing for us. I can tell you 1,000 places around California. There's a Cambodia town. City of Long Beach has the second largest Cambodian population in the world outside of Cambodia. They spend money together. They support each other together. I got a buddy that's Cambodian, owns a bagel shop. All of his buddies, he's helped get a bagel shop.
Wow. Wow. I think that's a profound statement you make in terms of, action versus just rhetoric and really it's a matter I find of overcoming habits. We have that habit of seeing ourselves more as a spectator in what's happening around us as opposed to the creator of what's around us, right? We're a
Yes.
product of our environment instead of our environment being a product of us. And what I would say is on the optimistic side of the Dr. Claude Andersons and going all the way back to Marcus Garvey's and before that even,
Mhm.
there have always been these Black economic champions, people that understood that 2 plus 2 was 4, even if they were constantly being told that it was 7, they knew that 2 plus 2 was 4, right? O.W. Gurley and Black Wall Street, stuff like that, right? Common sense men and women that just said, no, 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 it's better if we own Madam C.J. Walker, people like that, right? So what I would say is that when we say that, okay, no one was listening, I think you would agree that that's not entirely true, right? There's a lot of us
Mhm.
that have been listening, and it's a challenge because sometimes you're dealing with an environment where the majority of people are still sort of stuck in a certain mindset, right? We're just gonna watch it happen. We're gonna pray about it. We're gonna sit and feel sorry for ourselves. But I think you have a really strong contingent, and you've always had this of people that say, no, 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 I'm gonna get out here and I'm gonna make something happen.
Yep.
We're gonna start that school. We're gonna go build something, and it's not as if we would be the first ones to do this because if you go back and there's a brother, William, I think William Simmons, I believe that's his name. He came out of slavery and they started, him and a bunch of former slaves started Simmons College in Kentucky.
Hmm.
And they were educating thousands and thousands of Black people in all the sciences, math, law, medicine, everything. and they did it with very little, it's pretty much no support from any government agency. They weren't seeking to have this integration fantasy. Realize this is like early 20th century, right? So I think I would argue that the key to our future really lies in our past, because what they were dealing with is something we're not dealing with.
Mhm.
They were dealing with the fact that if you start a black-owned business, they might kill you. I have people in my own bloodline who built businesses and built wealth who were murdered and they took their stuff. This
Yeah.
is my family, right? And there's millions of us that have this. This is why that reparations conversation can't ever go away, because a lot of people in this room have loved ones who were just as smart as you. They just lived in 1908 instead of 2025. But the thing was that people literally came along and just stole their stuff. They would block them at every turn. They would burn it down. They would do. Now it doesn't mean they can't still, fight dirty, but nobody's ever come and tried to kill me
Mm.
because of what I do. No one's ever, I've never been a white man who slapped a book out of my hand and said, "I'm gonna put you in jail, boy, if I catch you reading again." You know what I mean? I've never run into any KKK members standing outside my business saying we're gonna burn it down. My white neighbors are very nice people. You know what I mean? So given that we have less resistance, and we have this blueprint that's already been made. Before Dr. Claude, there was somebody that taught him to be
Yeah.
who he is, right? Um, I think the part of the answer, and maybe you can tell me what you think about this. The answer is let's go get the blueprint. Let's go back. Let's educate ourselves on what our great grandparents did, and then apply that same tenacity, that same spirit of energy, that same like, get your hands dirty, dig in, make it happen. That same resilience they have. People don't understand business takes resilience. You can't
Yes.
be no punk ass investor. You can't walk away scared because it didn't work out and you lost a little money. You gotta go hard and keep going. Go hard or go home. Stop being a damn punk, right? If we come with that resilience in today's society with fewer obstacles, I believe we're going to win. I'm going to let you answer that question while I go answer the door. The floor is yours, brother. Please go ahead.
So I think of it from a couple of standpoints. I sit on the board of a YMCA, and a few years ago I was meeting with the YMCA of Tulsa, because the YMCA of Tulsa was the first place to provide refuge to Black Wall Street when those residents were murdered and massacred. And it was interesting because I looked at what they did there. I mean, they were in they it was like everything. And when they came through and did that, the YMCA came in and stepped in and helped people that were displaced become placed. But remember, a few years after that, I think we had Rosewood again. So as we talk about resiliency and the Rosewood, when I spent time researching that model, I was like, my God, because they fixed a lot of stuff that they thought was broken in Black Wall Street in regards from a defense perspective. And it showed you the resiliency of the people, the resiliency of Black people as a whole, and the things that we're able to do and the things that we're able to accomplish, and that we can't be stopped once we set our minds to something. Um, and to Dr. Boyce's point, I think we don't have a lot of resistance in front of us. There's a lot of resistance behind us, and I think that resistance could be the invisible boundary that we place on ourselves. That we have been tricked into thinking that not everyone can do what everyone is supposed to do. I mean, I think it's a level of expectation. When I look at, how we prop up entertainers, it was very interesting this last election cycle when I looked at the people that they put in front of certain parties to say, these are the people you should listen to. And it bothered me in the sense like, this is what you think about us. You can put somebody in front of me shaking their behind, and I'm supposed to believe what they say. I'm supposed to believe people that haven't lived like I live and haven't done the stuff that don't face some of the trials that I face, but I'm supposed to listen to them. And so now, I think somebody said in the chat, we have to become persistent in our education. Not just educate ourselves, we have to become persistent in our education and understand that the things that drive wealth, Um, there's a white guy I know lives not too far from here, right? And so he lives in a house, and they've done some work in the house, and that was a house that his father bought with his GI Bill back in 1953. Now, let me tell you why that's important, Dr. Boyce. And you and I had talked about this years ago because you had talked about the GI Bill. And I think this was last time you were here for the Black Wealth Boot Camp. I talked about this on stage, but you and I had talked about it. And then it caused me to go talk to my dad, who's from Hot Springs, Arkansas, class of 1959, came from Langston Negro High School, because as he says to my kids, baby, that's where the Negroes went. Um, I asked him one day, I said, Dad, how come you didn't take part of your GI Bill back then? And he goes, well, I didn't know about it. I was like, you joined the Navy at like 17 years old. And he was like, yeah. He was like, they didn't really talk to us in Arkansas about that. Then I was like, oh, shoot, why not? Well, Dr. Boyce, let me ask you a question. You know who oversaw the implementation of the GI Bill? Senate.
Mm.
Senate was responsible for that. And so
Really?
what did we have? Um, what did we have when we had senators in the forefront back in those days? We had Strom Thurmond, noted segregationalist.
Mhm.
We had Robert Byrd. We had, years later, Joseph Robinette Biden. So of course we didn't have a great deal in out of the applicants, the total black applicants for GI Bill. I think it was like 3% were approved. So we didn't even have those things to participate in. And I say that to talk about the guy I know. That he lives in a house now that his father owned and paid off many years ago, that he bought on the GI Bill in Lakewood, California, when Lakewood was right outside of Long Beach. Lakewood was a master plan city planned for GIs that returned home from the war. So what you didn't have a lot of there is you didn't have a lot of black folks that lived over there, right? And so this guy has now taken this house. House is worth probably, I don't know, 9, 10, something like that. He will now pass that house on to his son in a positive debt equity ratio because he only has one son. That son will take that house eventually and pass it on to his son, or sell it and pass those resources on to his son. So they have created generational wealth from things that were made available to them.
Mm.
See, we have to make sure we're not create a generational accumulation of goods to pass on. We got to figure out, how do we pass on wealth? Big difference.
Mm.
Big difference passing
Yeah,
on your Rolex watch, or your, all these things, and not passing on wealth. Same
yeah.
thing with the insurance model.
Or even just or even just think about, some of us, and it's not just our people that do this, but just when you pass along a bunch of horrible stuff, a lot of problems and mental illnesses and
Yeah.
bad choices and bad habits, and passing down alcoholism and just fried chicken, I
And
think
so
trauma and
Mark B just said in the comments, and I usually don't read the comments, but he said something. He says generational wealth is will. He said even with the GI Bill, there's still redlining in real estate. So as you continue to talk about the whole idea of reparations, that it can't go away, this is why it can't go away, because this system has been set up strategically. And even now today, they talk about, hey, well, we don't look at race. Well, I mean, there's still your financial institution. If it's not listed on the mortgage application, your financial institution still understands race and demographic information, because
yeah,
you fill it on when you sign up for financial institutions. A lot of them, particularly credit unions, they have you put it on to make sure, because when they go to the state to get additional grant funding, they can say, hey, we serve this many percentage of the underrepresented communities. And so people still pay attention to that, even if it doesn't expressly come forward in underwriting.
Yeah, and even if you don't pay attention to race, you can always, grab onto proxy variables that are connected to race, right? You can say, I I didn't discriminate against you because you're black. I discriminated against you because of this other thing that black people tend to do, right? Like,
Yes,
like the crack to powder disparity. They like, oh, it has nothing to do with race, but we know that crack versus powder was directly linked to race, right?
right.
And that's another common tactic of oppression is you just find something, you find that group you don't like, and you find something about them, something that they do that's different, and you criminalize, that particular thing. And so you're right. I think that there are those obstacles, that we have to overcome. And I really will say, in fact, I think that the racial wealth gap is a bit of a distraction. I use the word illusion, but it wasn't because I don't believe it exists. It's because I think that we can end up getting overly focused on trying to have as much wealth as white people in a country that's kind of run by white people.
Hmm.
I think that's difficult, right? I don't know how that can happen when they have that ability to just change the laws. Like just the population strength alone means that you're up against an obstacle. Now, if you ever wanted to have the same amount of wealth, then that might require going to places where you dominate the population, because then people like yourself get to make the laws, and the laws shape who gets the money. Like, for example, you look at the way, I think I saw a video today where Trump's son was showing his Bitcoin mining facility, and now his son mines 2% of all the Bitcoin that exists in America, or that's produced in America. And we know that it's because his dad is the president, right?
Yeah.
If they locked his dad up and he never got a chance to become president, then this wouldn't be happening. So those, that sort of access makes a difference, and it's not something to complain about. It's just a fact, right? So I think that if you want to call it white privilege, I think it does exist in America, because America is a mostly white country, for the most part. And so I think the bigger question then becomes, as black people, if you're looking to build black wealth, you have to establish spaces where there is black privilege, right? And these may be, microcosmic spaces. Like, so for example, in this space right now where we are, there's black privilege, right? You have an advantage because you're black. All the people in here have an advantage because I have an advantage because I'm black. If I, you know, suddenly turned into an Asian guy, I probably wouldn't have the same amount of social capital in this space that I have as a black man, right? So I think that if we get creative in terms of how we really think about this wealth thing and start, really drilling into it, there's so many opportunities that are there. And one thing I've just learned over time, as a math guy, is I never really got better at solving a problem by just complaining about the problem and complaining about the obstacles. Like, you bump into a door and you keep bumping into the door, and you keep banging your head against the thing, and you're like, the door is there, 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 right? But that's kind of what we do. Like, you sit down with black people that claim to be, improving the community, and all you'll hear are complaints about the problems. All you'll hear is what they're doing to stop us, right? And it's like, okay, I know this. I know what they're doing to stop us. We know about all that. Now, what are we doing to work around it? And are we, because if we're walking into a space where we claim to be solving a problem, but we're constantly reminding ourselves that the problem can't be solved, then what are we doing here? We're wasting our time.
This is part of my anti-politics soapbox rant,
Mm.
because I listen to people that tell me this is what you should believe, this is what you should do. There is a problem, but they're paid by the same problem.
Oof.
So, I sat down with some guys a couple of weeks ago that were, by all intents and purposes, lobbyists, for a large union in the state of California. And as I talked to them, just trying to understand, we were smoking a cigar at a cigar lounge. As I was talking to them about what they do, it helped me understand. I was like, Jesus. I mean, it was so disheartening, because I was like, everybody's paid. Like, everybody's doing what they got to do because they're paid by the people around them. So you have to figure out, like, who's gonna. And one of the guys said something that he was like, "Hey, we were trying to just make sure that this legislature, that he was doing the right thing." And I was like, "Huh." And I was like, "Well, what's the right?" Now I'm like, I'm invested into this. I'm like, I lean in. I'm like, "Well, what's the right thing?" He was like, well, to like vote on stuff that impacted our labor activity. I was like, my God. He was like, yeah, because if not, then we won't support him, and we'll tell everybody else not to support him, and we'll tell these groups that we give money to not to support him either.
Hmm.
Whoa. And so as we start paying attention to this, and when I look at these leaders, these so-called leaders that they've propped up in front of us and said, these are the people you should listen to, I look at, well, who's paying them? And
Hmm.
people say that kind of stuff doesn't matter from an economic perspective. It most assuredly matters from an economic perspective. Look at that. Look at how many people that we have in Congress that are millionaires off of $174,000 salaries. How does that happen?
Right. And and then think about it like this. Everybody in this room can relate to this. Um, if I get paid by Wendy's, I'm gonna wear a Wendy's uniform and
Mhm.
I'm gonna sell Wendy's hamburgers. If I get paid by UPS, I'm not gonna wear a McDonald's uniform if I'm working for UPS. I'm team UPS. You know, they've given me instructions, right? It's not and I can claim like no, I do all this. I deliver packages every day because that's just who I am internally and I just want to do right by society. No, you don't. Like you're literally a your spirit has been taken by UPS during that
Yep.
time, which means that everything you're doing during the working hours in which they own you is going to be for the benefit of UPS and to fulfill the agenda of UPS and to make more money for UPS. And I'm not saying that that's bad. A
No.
lot of us have worked for somebody, but we got to understand that the biggest employees in America are our politicians. And so the operative question really should be, who do you work for? And I think the big myth and the big lie that they will always say is, well, I work for the American people. But we know that's not true because if the American people all support you, but but the big money people don't, it's going to be really difficult for you to get elected because elections are won by votes, but votes are won by money. Marketing spend is a critical dimension of having the chance to get elected. If
Mhm.
somebody's not putting 100 million, 200 million total or whatever in your bank account for you to buy the advertising to get those votes, then you don't get elected. So you're not going to work for the sheep that are manipulated by the marketing, right?
Mhm.
It's a sheep thing, right? So the sheep are manipulated by the marketing, and we all as sheep will see a certain message and it'll resonate, and we'll all go vote for this person. But the person who is actually in control is the person who collected and rounded up the sheep, right? And that's why my term for black leaders is I call many of them Negro managers because their job is not really to lead black people. Their job is to manage us, corral us up. And I've sat in these conversations with people, and I remember Cornel West telling me about how he sat in a room for hours with Barack Obama and Jesse Jackson Jr. and some other people and one of Axelrod or something that was his name, and all they did was they sat around and said, how do we get black people to support Barack Obama? Because at that time, black people didn't vote for him because they
Right.
all wanted to. Everybody was going to vote for Hillary. We'd been brainwashed to do that. And so the thing was, well, maybe if we try this, then they'll all do this and they'll all do that, right? And so really, and the reason Cornell was pissed off, if anybody wants to know the rest, he was angry because he supported and helped them, and then they kind of just shifted the agenda once he got the power, right? They're like, okay, we don't need you anymore, so you're dismissed, boy, go away. And he was like, I'm not doing that, right? So long story short, I think that we in general it have the impossible task of figured out how to convince the majority of our community to become independent thinkers, which I think is really tough to do because the
Mhm.
studies show that 70% of all people will follow the crowd, even if the crowd is wrong. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, who's that 30%? That's who I want to talk to. That's my version of the talented 10th or the talented 30. And let's figure out how we can shape an agenda. And that agenda has to start with some type of economic independence because if UPS is paying your bills, you'll never be able to pursue your agenda on UPS's dime. They're not going to pay you to. Ain't nobody out here really going to pay you to be black. They're not going to pay you to be free. They're not going to pay you to be independent. They're not going to pay you to build your community. You have to find a way to generate that that sort of economic freedom to allow you to be free. So if I can afford to quit my job at UPS and I can take the day off, then that's when I get to truly become who I'm supposed to be. Does that make sense? Does everybody get what I'm saying? I want to make sure I lay this point down carefully. If my goal is, Shannon, if my goal is to be a dad or to be a husband or to be, to play basketball, whatever it is I want to do, I have to get off work to do these things. I can't do these things while I'm on the clock with UPS. So I have to find a way to have some space that allows me to find out who am I, what matters to me, what's my agenda, and be able to pursue that. And one catalyst that can really help make that happen is my ability to pay my own bills. Once I learned to pay my own bills, then the only agenda I had to follow was Boyce's agenda. Like you and I are talking right now, not because some corporate sponsor gave me money and said you have to bring Shannon Stewart on the platform. Just got, but I said, man, Shannon's a cool dude. He would really add value. Let's get Shannon in here, right? So we got to pay that cost to be the boss, and I think teaching that to our kids early is one of the keys. Shannon, please.
So you talked about this years ago when we first met from with Lene Javette. You talked about this
Yeah.
because you had just transitioned out of the corporate space. You had just gone through all of that you went through with the university. It was like a hit. If y'all don't know Dr. Boyce's history, it was a history behind all this, right? And so I was talking about this. I was speaking at last month to a group of like 300 finance personnel at a credit union. So I was telling them this. So if you think about this, boys, that if you 168 hours in a week, right? So if you minus out sleep, um, and all of that, you minus out sleep, you spend 43% of your available lifetime at your employer. That is crazy. 40, including travel, the 8 hours plus hour lunch, et cetera, et cetera. 43% of your lifetime you spent helping others pursue their vision. And I was telling them this. I said, like, everybody under the sound of my voice, you were created with a purpose, right? The most important 2 days, two of the most important days in a man's life, boys, are these. And y'all listen to this. Two extremely important days in a man's or woman's life. The day you were born, the day you find out why you were born. If you operate on that, what's the day I was born? What's the day I found out why I was born? Then your life will forever change. Well, you won't be handcuffed to being at a place of 43% of your life that doesn't align with your vision, how you want to live, and how you want to do things. I mean, I've had to come to that realization over the last few years because I got kids. I got a 16-year-old son that's a junior in high school and a 12-year-old girl. We're charting these journeys for them. But I had to figure out, like, okay, I have to now be at places that align with me. And they're not jobs. One of my mentors, my speaking mentor, helps me as manage my speaking business, Milton Hunt. He always talks about this. He always says that if you don't have a purpose, you'll end up working for somebody that does. And that's okay. And so you have to now, everything I do, I look at it, if it's outside of the house, like as an income stream. It's just a project I'm involved with. Now, if I have to look at that, if I got to be there from 8 to 5 every day, that has to be a project that really aligns with where I got to be. Because I have to understand that they don't value me as much as I value me. And because of that, it puts them in a position of perceived power where they think they can act loose or talk loose or say things or do things and they won't get checked or bust upside their head. Proverbial. We're not going to go around smacking folks upside the head. But this is where we got to come. This is where true financial independence comes from. It comes from us being willing to take that step. Boyce talked about this years ago where he talked about getting off the corporate plantation. And I remember that I would look at the comments. I don't read the comments, but I would look at like some of the lives, and you weren't on Instagram, then it was just Facebook. I would look at some of the comments that people would say, and I was like, these step and fetch it dudes, they don't even understand what this guy went through to force him to get to the point where he was like, I'm not doing with this no more. I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Go talk to my people. Something had to happen that was catastrophic enough where he was like, I can't deal with being at this place, no matter how prestigious it appears, and I'm gonna have to go do my own thing.
That's a good point. You bring that up. I keep forgetting that where the bodies are buried. Shannon's OG. We go way back. I think I eventually figured out that I have to give some grace, to people that didn't understand where I was coming from. Because sometimes I know I can be harsh, but I don't apologize because I got to be real clear. Because we can't be out here wasting time and being afraid. But um, I do know a lot of times, if you ask somebody that goes to work every day, would you quit your job if you could? Most people are going to say yes. So it's not about desire that gets in the way. It's not like people just love going to work. It's because confidence. They just don't they either don't know how to quit and walk away from that, or they don't feel it's possible. Right. So like if you're going, I mean, so it almost in the minds of some people, the idea of getting off a corporate plantation is like telling people that you're selling space balloons. It's like, yeah, 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 more false hope. And I get it, right? I get it. And I know that I had a cheat code in a couple of areas. One, I was over 40 when I did a lot of this stuff. If you're younger, maybe you don't know what the range of possibilities are. And then two, I happen to be a financial expert. Having a doctorate in finance gives you an advantage, right? So what that led me to do was to say, okay, let me think about simple, practical things that will help us all understand that this is doable and it's possible, especially when you have the gift of time. And it's really possible. In fact, it becomes probable if you think in an intergenerational context, right? Like if you can care about somebody other than yourself, like you have children and you care about your children, and you say you have a 2-year-old and you say, I don't want my 2-year-old son to ever work for anybody. Well, that's easy. That's an easy plan because you got 23 years, or whatever, of preparation time before he turns 25. And as you know, with compound interest, that's the ace in the hole, man. That man, like really, I mean, you put as much behind that 23-year agenda as you put into paying bills every month. Like you put the same amount of money on your stock portfolio that you're putting into your car note or whatever it is, then that kid's going to have so much money he won't have to work for anybody. It's very easy. It requires no investing knowledge or practically no investing knowledge because you literally are just grabbing an S&P 500 index fund, popping it in there, right? And being consistent with it. That's the hard part. So the execution then becomes the issue as well. And that's one of the reasons why we started doing class. I made that conscious decision at the beginning of 2024. I said, I don't want to talk to people once a week or once a month. I want to talk to them every single morning, right? Because I said, yeah, if I want to be a great athlete, I got to train every day.
Yeah.
If I want to be whatever you do every day repeatedly defines you because that's your habit. That becomes your culture, right? Because we have a really hard job, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But the really hard job is how do we really get in here and really, 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 really shift culture in a way where we're not just talking. I get tired of hearing us talk about all what we could do and what's possible and all that. That's great.
Yeah.
But now we got to get down and dirty and make it happen and be consistent with it.
But
Shannon, please.
it has to be a habit. It takes 21 days. I was talking about this last Thursday. I was speaking to a group of people that run an AV company, right? And so they do like high-end audio-visual installation, and they wanted me to come to and talk to them about maximizing their potential, growing their value. And I was telling them this, that, it takes 21 days to build a habit. And so, but 90 days for that habit to become a lifestyle. What's the difference? A lifestyle is something that you do, like you do it no matter what. I got a buddy that's 60, right? The guy's in phenomenal shape, right? 60 years old, he's in the best shape of his life. And so I asked him one day, I said, hey, walk me through your morning routine. He was like, oh, I get up at 5, I do a prayer walk with my dog, I do a cold plunge, go to the gym, come back, shower, get my day started. I said, do you put that in your calendar in the morning? And I knew the answer, but I asked him, and he goes, no. He said, because it's a way of life for me. I don't put that I need to eat or breathe in my calendar. So now I'm like, okay, so as we build habits, we're building lifestyles that can change generations, because you talked about that. We've had so much passed down over the generations. If we think about those of us that have baby boomer parents, my parents' big thing was my dad's from the segregated South. He's like, you're going to go to school, get a job, go to college, get a good job. He retired from Coca-Cola and General Electric, two Fortune 10 companies. My
Wow.
kids don't see that. Like they're like, all right, we are gonna go do something completely different. We're gonna, my son's like, I want to do what I want to do because I saw that you didn't get to do what you want to do all the time because you had kids. Like, right? So he was it. So when I talk to people about purpose and plan, they think about it very short-sighted. But I talk about purpose and plan because people are watching you, and you got kids that are watching you, and it's understanding what you were created to do. And I talked about this earlier that everybody under the sound of my voice was created with a purpose, and a purpose doesn't feel like a job. You can't take my purpose away from me. My desire to change people's lives through speech, through interaction, through deliverance of words. You can't change that. You can't take that away from me because that's what I'm supposed to do. Boys, I'm gonna tell you something. So we run an organization, Helping Hands, Giving Hope. We put Christ, love, and work clothes. My wife and I started that organization when we first met, like in 2015. My son was 6. My daughter was 2. A month ago, they came to me and set me down and was like, Dad, we got to talk to you. And they get my daughter to do it. And I was like, well, you're 12. You don't have the authority to just call a family meeting. I'm like, we got to talk to you. They was like, Dad, we were removing you of your duties at Helping Hands Giving Hope. Like this is Helping Hands Giving Hope. This is a
Yeah, and what's the website in case anybody wants to donate or something?
it's
I
a
love it.
the number 4, hhgh.org, or you can find us on Instagram at Helping Hands Giving Hope,
Okay,
or
that's the number 4 HHGH for Helping
.org.
Hands Giving
Yeah.
.org. Okay. All right. Somebody type that
Or
in the chat, the number 4. I want to be intentional here. The
and
number
then I'll put
4
it in the chat
HHGH
also.
org. Okay. Go
And so
ahead, please.
they say to me, they go, "Hey, we're gonna we are gonna remove you from your duties." So how you gonna remove me from the duties of something I created? Well, Dad, we don't feel that you are operating at your full capacity. And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, we had some stuff that we had to do, and you know, we think you should just go and raise money and go out and talk to people. Hey, how you doing, guys? I'm Shannon Stewart, Helping Hands, Giving Hope. But we don't need you to do anything else. And I said, well, okay. I said, well, I'm just concerned because like I started this. How you gonna remove him? And I put my website in there. You guys can follow everything about me on the website. And so my son goes, Dad, we want to get you where you're operating at your best. This ain't your best. This ain't what you're built to do. So you know what I told him? I said, well, when I create my next nonprofit, Helping Hands, Still Giving Hope, without y'all, we're gonna see how all of this gets corrected. Because and we were out last night picking up food, and look, I don't have to do any of this logistic stuff anymore. My son does it, and so they're asking me like, Big Shannon, what do we do? And my son goes, no, no, no. Hey, I'll address those questions to me now. I tell you guys what we're gonna do. The driver's coming here. We're gonna load the trucks here. We're gonna do that. And I was like, oh, they've gotten this because more is caught than taught. No matter how much I try to teach them, that ain't gonna work, man. It's not. They gotta see it in action. They gotta be able to see it. If they can see it, then they can know what we're doing. If they see it
Mhm.
long enough, they seen it since he was 6 years old. Now he knows how he wants to do stuff. He sees things like modern day people see things. Not like because that's all how I've always done it. Like that's not how I've always seen things. He sees completely different. And that's going to be the next phase. It's going to be empowering our young leaders now. Because you talked about this earlier. It's a difference between a leader and a manager, guys. When Boyce talked about the Negro managers, it's a big difference between a Negro and a manager. A manager is Boyce, go out and get these 100,000 people to vote for me, put this in front of them, do this, do that, come back and report to me what you got. A leader says, I need to galvanize you, Boyce, so you could see the vision, purpose, and plan that I have, and you could come alongside of me and we can do this together. That's a big difference. A leader imposes a vision. That's it. A manager does not. I talk about this in my discussion, the leader versus the manager and you. There's a whole big difference in that. We do a family board meeting every Sunday where I give it's a board agenda. We have a vision, a household vision and mission statement that someone reads, and hey, how are we with the household vision and mission so everybody knows what we're supposed to do. I'm trying to lead this family so we can do the right things and then raise up these young people so they can do leaders so I can go out and do something else. So I can go out and do Shannon Speaks in my next speaking venture and they can grow Helping Hands Giving Hope and I can just go out and get money. And I just
Wow.
want to impact people's lives. At the end of the day, I don't care what happens. I don't care what we do. I mean, today, I don't care what we do, what happens, what goes on. I just need to make sure 300 people get fed today. How in the hell we
Wow.
get the 300 meals? I don't care what happens. Wherever you want to get them from, if however we do it, as long as I can get 300 turkeys and 9,000 pounds of food into the hands of people, that's all I want to do. If I can go out and talk to, if you say, hey, I'm paying you 10 grand to come out and talk to my 300 person staff, I don't care what happens as long as I get to go out and talk to your 300 person staff. They get what they're supposed to get. They leave feeling empowered, embraced, loved, and encouraged. I don't care what happens. And no one can get me off that hill because I'm not managed. I'm leading. You can't get me off that hill. No Democratic leader, no Republican leader. Nobody can get me off this hill of saying I need my people to be empowered so they can go out and make wise financial choices so they can know that they don't have to work for people if they don't want to. So they know that they don't have to be played out and have to have somebody twerking in front of them. And that's how I'm going to vote because that's what you tell me to do. Like years ago, we watched the guy say, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. A guy that helped the 94 crime bill. We let that guy say, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. You let Trump come up and say, well, they're taking all the black jobs. What are black jobs? Every job is a black job if that's what black people want to do. It tells you that nobody cares for us. We got to care for us.
That's funny. Yeah, and it's funny when you talk about that twerking. They did do that the campaign "Booties to the Polls." I remember that when they literally had twerking. Like we got to do whatever we can. And you're right. I mean, if you don't if you don't know where you're going, there's always somebody that does know where they're going, and they're going to get you to go where they're going. Right. So what he's talking about is the purpose-driven life in general, where you have a sense of purpose. You know what direction you're going. It's very difficult for some like so if you know where what your purpose is and where you're going, and you're walking down the street and somebody says, hey, go in the direction I'm going, you're gonna do what? You're gonna say, no, I'm already going over here. But if you have nowhere to go and you're hanging on the corner, you're just an idle mind, then they will be more than happy to take that empty space and get you to become a drone for their agenda. So I want to say thank you, Shannon, for a great conversation, man. I want to remind everybody tonight we're not going to do the Powernomics training that we do every Wednesday night. I realize we have to do a stock options income class because we haven't done those for a while. So those who want to study stock options income with us, just go to drboyceprime.com, drboyceprime.com. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of great opportunities out there in the markets. I can show you some strategies that'll make you money tomorrow, literally. And also, another thing I want to mention is pretty soon the Black Wealth calendar will be ready. I'll text that out, the link as soon as it's ready. We make it only for you guys. We don't even really offer it outside of here. And so if you want to get a Black Wealth calendar, you can put on your fridge and have Black Wealth principles in front of your children and your family every single day. I will send you all the link. Make sure you're on the text list for this class. To get on the text list, text the word morning to the number 87948. Text morning to 87948. If you're international, then you can register for the Zoom and come in that way. So let me give Shannon's Shannon's website again, so that you guys can, if you want to support him in feeding hundreds of families, you can go to the number four, hhgh.org. That's 4hhgh.org, and it stands for Helping Hands Giving Hope. Is that
Mhm.
right? There we go. And so God bless all of you that are doing good stuff for the world. And let's keep moving and keep kicking butt, taking names. And one more thing I want to mention too is I on my Instagram I mentioned investments I'm making in airline stocks. There's a ticker symbol JETS, Jets. That most people don't know that only Shannon that only one in five people has ever actually flown in an airplane. Did you know that? I thought that was
No,
crazy. Yeah, this is worldwide, globally, right? And so the CEO of Delta said that. And I said, "Holy crap! I didn't think about that. I assume everybody, half, 70%, right? No, but that's American thinking, right? And what he said is that there's countries around the world where almost nobody flies, so there's all this expansion opportunity." I said, "Oh, okay." In the spirit of getting adding to the portfolio something that's diversified, I looked up this ETF and the ticker symbol is JETS, JETS, and it invests in a bunch of different airlines. So you're not picking one. and it'll allow you to sort of be a part of that long term if that's of interest to you. So anyway, thank you guys for hanging out, and thank you again, Mr. Shannon Stewart. We got to have you back, man. It's always awesome to see you, brother.
Thank
God
you.
bless you, man.
God bless y'all. Have a great day.